75 years of MotoGP, which means we're sat on the pitbull edge of the 76th season. And this week, things start to get fast, pressurized, and fun once more. Welcome to the Paddock Pass podcast and show 389. I'm Adam Wheeler, and I'm joined by two wizened souls from the extreme ends of the follicle scale, the shiny David Emmett and the foresty Neil Morrison. We were hoping to be joined by two world superbike legends, one being Ben Spies and the other Steve English, but Ben is busy getting his new team set up for Moto America and Daytona, and the schedules just wouldn't align, while Steve was so intimidated by having to make MotoGP predictions that he instead started to look up some creative variations on the humble pie recipe. We've got a lot to get through today, but first I want to know how prepared and clear you are with your 2024 MotoGP forecasting, Dave.
No. I'm just completely unprepared for everything. It's but this always sort of happens. It sort of creeps up on you. You sort of like think, I've got all this time to prepare and to think about it and all the rest of it, and then sort of lots of things happen in between, and then all of a sudden it's oh no, it's starting. But it's going to be great. Genuinely, it's going to be a really, really good season.
Well, we're hoping to get through some predictions and some wild takes on what might happen this year. So it could be a very lengthy podcast if you haven't mended your ways, Dave. But Neil, are you ready to scoff and look witheringly at some of our ideas today?
Well, it just comes so naturally to me, Adam, that I would say I'm born ready in that regard. But if it's ready for the season to start, I'm a bit like Dave. I kind of looked at this week and thought, oh, Monday, Tuesday, plenty of time to write up my Moto2 and Moto3 notes for commentary this weekend. And then just people keep messaging and requesting things, and time keeps getting filled. So it's getting closer. But yeah, I think we've just got about enough time to make it work.
It's so hard when you're popular, isn't it? I'll have to send Susan, your mum, a message to stop bothering you when you're trying to get ready for a Grand Prix. 2024 is the start of KTM's 8th season in MotoGP. We're lucky to have some KTM backing on the Paddock Pass podcast this year, and the brand has already taken AMA Supercross wins in 2 categories, with 3 riders and 2 bikes. And the MXGP World Championship also starts this weekend with the Grand Prix of Argentina at Neuquén. Good to see there's going to be a Grand Prix happening in Argentina in somewhere and somehow. KTM race and win with a 450 SXF and the 250 SXF, and the technology that pours into the MotoGP RC16 machine trickles into the electronics and developments found in other motorcycles. KTM have revamped, the Duke naked bike range for 2024, their 30th anniversary of the concept, and the 990 Duke is currently the must-have or must-try model. Get down to any KTM stockist to get the saliva dripping, because the 990 Duke not only ticks many boxes for any rider, but positively rips them apart. MotoGP news first, guys. Pecco Bagnaia, the inevitable press release came out yesterday, I believe, as we're recording this, and 2 more years in Ducati, Dave. So that means we now have 4 riders on the grid settled for next season, and you have to imagine that some more are going to come tumbling soon in terms of, contract news and whatever else. But Bagnaia, this was just a matter of time, wasn't it?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, and also this is the obvious time to announce it. In the week running up to the first race of the season, there was no doubt that Bagnaia was going to stay where he is. He has no reason to leave. Ducati, I mean, first of all, they want to keep him because he won them 2 championships. He showed during testing, like, he's looking really, really strong during testing. He's happy. The whole situation just looks very, very good. So there's no reason for him to go. There's no real reason for him to go anywhere else. I'm sure he had offers from other factories, but they would have been sort of, if you fancy a go, come over here. But Pecco likes winning races. He likes winning championships. Ducati give him his best shot at winning a championship. Just one thing, I don't know if it's worth mentioning, the 4 people now with contracts, Johann Zarco and Luca Marini at Honda, both have contracts for 2025. Obviously, Brad Binder, was it last year in Austria where he signed on through 2026? And now Pecco Bagnaia through 26 as well.
Yeah, like you say, Zarco and Marini, it's quite notable perhaps that Honda have 2 riders locked up for next season already because they need that development continuity, I suppose. But Neil, maybe one of the more interesting questions now when it comes to the Lenovo factory Ducati team is who will be Bagnaia's teammate for next year. That's probably got to be the big one, right? I mean, that is arguably the most coveted saddle on the grid next to the world champion.
Yep, exactly. And there's going to be 4 guys that I can think of definitely going for that seat. Martin Bastianini's obviously looking to hold on to it. Marquez will be looking to step up, and Marco Bezzecchi as well is another guy that will be looking for that. And I'm sure that there's quite a few guys from other factories as well that will be interested in it. I think now that they've got Bagnaia signed up for the next 2 years means that there's no massive rush because there is such a long list of riders that are interested in the seat. And also they need to kind of see how things play out in the first couple of races. I mean, there's no point making a decision now only to see. There's no point putting Marco Bezzecchi in now only for him to have a rancid first half of the year and now Bastianini to beat him convincingly in every single race from now until the summer break. So I think Ducati now have some time. There's no real rush to make this decision. And let the battle commence between those guys, as they say.
Dave, a difficult question for you. I mean, maybe we can tackle it a little bit later in the podcast as well. But Bagnaia, I think that takes him up to 8 years on Ducati machinery. And Andrea Dovizioso, perhaps the only other rider with an association that long. I mean, Bagnaia has something like 18 Grand Prix wins in just under 90 appearances. It's quite a formidable record. He hasn't ridden any other motorcycle in the Premier class. Why do people not necessarily talk about him as one of the greats of the modern era of MotoGP? I mean, is it too soon, or do you think we should be placing him in those kind of conversations?
I mean, last year I would have said no. Last year, after his first championship in 2022, I would have said no. After his second one in 2023, last year he just looked really, really strong. He made a big step forward. This year it looks like he's made a big step, during testing at least, it looks like he's made a step forward as well. So it's going to be interesting to see that. I think Bagnaia's biggest problem is that he is on a Ducati. And the Ducati is so very obviously the best bike on the grid. They have such a technical advantage. I mean, it's a bit like Mick Doohan is a giant of the sport. He's absolutely one of the greatest riders ever to sling his bike over his leg over a bike. But he was also, on the only game in town. He was the factory rider on the only game in town all throughout the late 90s. I mean, you see his worth not by the people he beat when he won his championships, but by the people he beat before he started winning his championships. When he was competitive with that era of superheroes, of the Raidies and Lawsons and Gardners and all the rest. So yeah, that sort of measures his worth. So I think the Bagnaia suffers a little bit with the same problem, where the Ducati is clearly superior. Is it Pecco or is it the bike? I mean, the bike plays a big role, but then if you look at the way that he beat Martin last year, even though he was clearly, Martin was faster than Pecco last year, but he still got beaten because Pecco was just the more rounded rider. I think if Pecco wins again this year with Marc on a Ducati, that's really going to raise his stock. And depending on how competitive the other bikes are, I think that's also going to make a difference. But yeah, I mean, there's a lot of. It's an interesting question, and one really you can only really start to talk about after his career is over. Once you know what he's done. But he got off to a slow start. He came in 19, I think, and he didn't really look particularly impressive in his first couple of seasons. It took him a little while to get going, and it's only really been the past 3 years that he's really been impressive.
That's a great point about Doohan, actually. I mean, you could argue that some of his wins and achievements in, say, 1992 and 93 hold more value than they do in, say, 95 100%. Or 96. Neil, what's your thought on that? Because we could argue that, we tend to believe we're quite sort of similar in these views that Marc Marquez is perhaps the greatest Grand Prix rider we've seen. Maybe Valentino Rossi is been done a disservice because he's still very much part of the establishment. I mean, Bagnaia is one of his riders. He was his first world champion. It was Morbidelli first. He was obviously another world champion from the VR46 stable. I was actually in Italy last week doing an interview with Pecco for the book. Had an hour and we sat in Valentino's office space.
Humble
And
brag.
a double brag. And it was just it was an incredible sort of facility. I mean, it is both a homage and a real kind of controlling hub of MotoGP, motorsport, merchandising and activity. And it just made you realize again what a huge big name he was in motorcycle racing. But for all of Rossi's promotional worth and the impact that he's had, we can't ignore the fact that he jumped off motorcycles and he managed to get a level of success with different teams and different brands and different cultures, and that ultimately has to be a test of the greatness, right? And that's why the storyline around Marc Marquez could potentially be more interesting than maybe a season of dominance by Pecco.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I agree with all of those points. Yeah, I mean it's more than just the titles. I think it's the riders that you beat that kind of cement your sort of legendary status, your greatness, and it's to an extent your character off the track as well, how you kind of connect with people. I mean, more people would, I think, classify Kevin Schwantz as a legend with only one world championship than maybe someone like, I don't know, Eddie Lawson or another guy that won 2 or 3 championships, just because he was the most popular rider of his day and he was something different. He was kind of cavalier. So yeah, I think all of those things definitely contributed. And maybe that's one of the things that might hold Pecco back from being viewed as a complete legend in people's eyes, because he's not that sort of big personality that sort of grabs you. It's not even like Marquez where you kind of love him or you hate him one way or the other. It's I don't think there's really many people that would dislike Pecco, but I don't think there's many people that would absolutely travel to the other side of the world to watch him race, kind of thing.
Yeah, I don't think there's very many people with Pecco tattoos.
I don't know, you'd be surprised. Dave, another piece of news. You were tweeting earlier this week that MotoGP could be looking at another TV deal for 2024 in the future. I mean, maybe this is the first signs of Dorna CCO Dan Rossamondo pulling some levers and making some things happen in his native market. But there was I think it was in Sports Business Journal. I should perhaps have written down where the article was written, but MotoGP could be appearing on the Warner Brothers and Discovery network, which means live transmission of the sprint races as well as the Grand Prix again in North America. And that has to be a positive step towards trying to grow the sport over there.
Yeah, definitely. It was Sports Business Journal, and someone on Twitter brought it to my attention, for which they have my eternal thanks. However, I mean, yes, it's really... It's interesting on the one hand that it's on, because I think under Warner Brothers Discovery, you also have things like NBC. So there's a chance of it getting sort of a bit more coverage, a bit more exposure. Obviously, the problem is always going to be that the races are on at inconvenient times for the US. It's always the crack of dawn, especially on the West Coast, when the races are on. So that's sort of a bit inconvenient. It's also interesting that it's Warner Brothers Discovery, because Warner Brothers Discovery now also has they bought TNT Sports, obviously, so they have MotoGP in the UK. I know that the people inside Warner Brothers Discovery Eurosport in Europe are really massive MotoGP fans. Or motorcycle racing fans in general. So I think it's an interesting fit there. I think it's good. It's going to be sort of less obscure. It's going to be on a more open channel, as it's going to be easier to find for fans. It's not going to be. It's not like a cure-all. You know what I mean? It's not suddenly going to be all across all of the news all of the time. For that, we also need sort of like big characters, and that's something which is a little bit missing at the moment. as we were talking about with Pecco Bagnaia, as great a rider as he is, he's he's quite a demure, shy sort of person. He's not a big, he's not a massive character. So yeah, it's going to be. I think it's a positive step, but it's not going to fix. It's not going to fix all of MotoGP's problems in a single globe.
Before we get on to the ridiculous part of the podcast with our predictions for this year, let's talk a little bit about Losail International Circuit. Less than 5 months, actually, since we were last there. We're going back. Qatar now reinstalled as the traditional season opener, and 2024, this year, is in fact the 20th anniversary since Qatar first hosted a race. MotoGP, quite famously, was the kind of the reason for being, I guess, for the Losail International Circuit. The initial races were held during the day until the huge Moscow lighting system was well established. Just being there recently for the test, I walk around that place forever in awe at the whole setup and the way everything works, just the different levels of the lighting, the way it's all angled and constructed. It's something quite phenomenal, really. It doesn't come across on TV that well, but it is an amazing circuit facility. Dave, I know you're not a great fan, but as a race course, we've had some pretty decent action there over the years, right?
Yeah, in terms of layout, it's fantastic. And also, it's probably the one track where you don't have to worry about the fact that the bikes are getting faster, because, they can add runoff whenever they like. There's a huge terrain around it. There's lots of spare space, and it's not as if they have to move grandstands. And even if they do, it's basically a very rich person's hobby. So he can spend whatever he likes. It's completely up to him. So yeah, but in terms of layout, it's fantastic. It does produce really good racing. It has a mixture of everything. A fast straight, some sweeping corners, some tight turns, some difficult technical turns. There are some really, really good things on it. The trouble is, it's in the desert, which is bad because it just ends up getting dusty all the time. So it's really difficult on the surface is really difficult on tires. It's one of the most difficult for tires for Michelin. That makes it difficult. The other thing is because it is a night race, it's not even a night race, it's an evening race, and they want to be the first race. And so there's this sort of like tight temperature window of when it can happen, which again, just sort of confuses everything. I wish it was somewhere else, put it that way. I wish it was somewhere with a slightly more temperate climate where we could do a race during the day, and it'd be absolutely fantastic.
Neil, it's going to be fun, you and I being at the same circuit and same media centre again, because it was only a short time ago you were getting so emotional with Digi's first Grand Prix victory. I know you were expecting it and waiting for it all season, and finally it arrived in such fantastic and memorable form. I thought you were going to start weeping last year. You were moved that much. Can we realistically expect another Italian Grand Prix win? Just to run through the stats, it's Jorge Lorenzo. He has the most Grand Prix wins at Losail, with 6 in all 3 categories. It's been 10 years since a bike other than a Ducati or a Yamaha won, and that was Marc Marquez back in 2014. Casey Stoner and Valentino Rossi have multiple victories, but the currently active rider with the most wins is Maverick Vinales, with 2 in the Premier class, the last one being in 2021, of course, with the Yamaha. Thoughts?
I was emotional last year at Losail, but it was probably because we had been sharing a media centre for the best part of a season by then, and that was just a little bit too much. But yeah, I think this promises to be a great weekend. Dave kind of hit the nail on the head in that it's a fantastic circuit, fantastic facility. We all have qualms, I think, about Qatar and how they go about their business in certain aspects of life. But if you're asking me how good is the racing going to be this weekend, I think it should be decent. From what I can see, this track still holds the record for being the closest top 10 in MotoGP history back in 2021, the Doha GP. And I think it might have at least one of the top 3 closest top 15 finishes ever as well in the Premier class. So you are normally guaranteed very close racing. Now, we didn't quite see that last year in November. It was still a really interesting race and a good fight between Pecco and Digi up front, and certainly pre-season testing, when we kind of analysed the longer runs there, there was quite a bit of disparity. It wasn't like everyone was really, really close, although the final times were quite close. So I'm not sure we're going to have a huge group of people fighting at the front, but it is going to be, I mean, I just love this time of year because there's so much speculating going on during testing, and it just gets a bit tiresome, I find, after a while. Oh, yeah, he's going to be fast. He could be good. He could be up there. This is where we actually see, right, put your cards on the table and show us what you've got. And I think there are quite a few unknowns going into this season, and I'm very excited to really find out more about those unknowns. They'll no longer be unknowns, hopefully.
The chase is always better than the kill, Neil. So I like the speculation. I always find it slightly disappointing when actual racing and results come through, because then I can't be. Then I end up being proved wrong as usual. But these things happen.
Who wants to see racing? I mean, come on.
Exactly. Who wants to see racing? I want to see testing. One thing we saw already, that the tests, the times were just absolutely insanely fast. The track. The way the track is, the new surface of the track, it's going to be almost like it's peak perfection now. Tracks take about a year to sort of like bed in for the oil the oil in the tarmac, because all the surface is, all asphalt is basically tar and oil and stones. So the most of the oil is sort of has evaporated. The stones are still sort of sharp without being worn, but they've had the real sharpness taken off, and so the times are going to be really, really fast. This is going to be a really, really fast racetrack, and it's also, I mean, to me, one of the most interesting things is what happens with the Pirelli rubber. We will see, I don't know about the sprint race. But certainly on Sunday, we'll see just how the Pirelli rubber is going to affect the Michelins and the MotoGP class, and will it be very much different from what happened with the Dunlops?
Is that you expressing an interest in Moto2 and Moto3?
Certainly. No, I mean, I think it's going to be. I think also the switch to Pirellis is going to make the racing in Moto2 much more interesting, because it will start to get a little bit of tire management, and it won't just be who's got the best setup, ready, steady, go, and away they go, and it's over after sort of like a lap and a half.
It's quite remiss of me to not mention the fact that you were in Jerez, Neil, at the Moto3 test. What did you see? I mean, how was the experience? For our Patreon followers, Neil did a fantastic Paddock Notes episode, which you can find on our Patreon channel. And of course, if people are still wondering how things went at Qatar for the test, then check out one of our earlier shows. I can't remember the number. It might have been 386. You can find it on SoundCloud or wherever you listen to your podcasters. You'll find the Qatar test wrap. But yes, back to Jerez now. Any kind of big sort of takeaways?
It was very difficult to know what was going on exactly in Moto2, because the popular conception of Pirellis were they were going to be faster over a single lap but slower over distance. That wasn't what we saw, because, I mean, they were a little bit faster than the Dunlops over a single lap, but not that much. And considering it was winter testing and low temperatures compared to the Grand Prix, I think people were expecting them to be quite a bit faster, and they weren't. Yet, when we're looking at some of the longer runs, they're actually holding up pretty well. So that was quite interesting. And there was a lot of different guys were fast. There was a couple of people that seemed to have come back into the running a little bit, Joe Roberts being the prime example. Don't be surprised if he does a good result this weekend. Moto3 was peculiar because of how fast it was. It was kind of like what Moto2 was expected to be. They were nearly 2 seconds under the lap record, and some guys at the front were doing the most ridiculous rhythm. The new KTM is such a massive step up on what they were running before. Honda's efforts to match them over the off season hasn't quite materialized. So, I think you're looking at maybe 5 or 6 really, really strong guys in Moto3, and maybe you won't have that same variety. I could see a kind of a year where you have maybe 5, 6 guys fighting at the front, kind of like the year Vinales won the championship in 2013, where it was the same kind of 4 or 5 guys fighting at the front every weekend. So, but you always have to caveat that with the fact that it was just one preseason test at one circuit in one set of conditions. There's going to be a whole host of other conditions to come. And the general consensus was that the racing should get shaken up a little bit. It should be closer, and there should be tire management utilized a lot more in both Moto2 and Moto3. So I think that's a good thing.
Good stuff. Don't forget to check out that content on our Patreon channel. Before we get onto the prediction categories, another reminder that Fly Racing have a ton of apparel and protection for street riding. Helmets, jackets, footwear, gloves, luggage, rain gear and vests for both men and women. Great quality, decent prices and elegant design. There's plenty to find at flyracing.com. They are masters of off-road gear and helmets, a special mention for the Formula S, but the road catalogue is also pretty stacked. Okay, on to our predictions, our thoughts, our forecasts, our crazy kind of, I don't know, what can we say, for the year ahead. Dave, I'm going to come straight to you. The pressure's on. MotoGP World Champion. Now, I know it's a little bit ridiculous or a bit strange or difficult even to be able to pick one. So I'm going to allow you to pick a rider through your head and one through your heart. So you're allowed two.
I mean, like the sensible choice is Pecco Bagnaia, just because he's been so fast all through testing. He is just growing in confidence. Now, I think that confidence is going to come back to bite him. I think there's going to be a few races where he's going to fall off for no reason other than that he was just wandering around thinking, "Oh, it's all right. I'm great. It's going to be fine," and it won't be fine because you still have to actually concentrate. But I still think he has the whole package. He's well sorted. I would like to see Marc Marquez win because I think it'd be just hilarious. It would be very, very funny to see Marc Marquez win on a year-old Ducati and beat all of that money that Ducati is spending to sort of wrap up the championship on a castaway bike. And also, like, I'm really looking forward to seeing Marquez sort of adapt to the bike. He is making really fast steps. It's just that it's quite complicated. So yeah, it's for me, I think it's going to be. I think it's going to be. In fact, it would be very funny if Marquez won the championship and Jorge Martin finished second. That would be the banterist, the most banter championship finish possible, I think.
Well, that's it. We've just lost our interview opportunities for Marc Marquez and Pecco Bagnaia for the whole season. Marquez is not going to come anywhere near you, Dave, after that sort of bold boast. Neil, over to you.
Yeah, I mean, it's really difficult to disagree with Dave. I think anyone that has been paying attention during preseason would say the head would go with Pecco. He's the reigning world champion. He has grown in stature, as Dave has said, and he's just been flawless through preseason. Saying the Ducati GP24 is even better than the GP23. And when you look at last year, yeah, there were 5 crashes on a Sunday, which kind of caused the championship to be as close as it was. But there were also, I think, 15 podiums on a Sunday. Sorry, there were 5 crashes on a Sunday and also 15 podium finishes. So basically, when he didn't bin it, he was pretty much there, always there on a Sunday. And I kind of think that knowing Pecco, he will have gone away and really tried to work on his sprints, because that was obviously something which was lacking last year. He won just 4 sprints compared to Martin's 9, and he was consistently outperformed by Martin in the kind of the autumn of the year, only to kind of bring it all back again on the Sunday. But I do think he'll probably have gone away and upped his sprint game. But if I'm talking about heart, then yeah, I mean, Marquez or Martin. I mean, those are the 3 guys that I'm looking at, and maybe Bastianini.
No, I said 2, not 3.
I'll say
You're
Martin.
harsh. You're a cruel and harsh man.
My heart is so big that it can carry many threads. That's what it is. But yes, I'll go with Martin. Dave's mentioned Marquez, but yeah, Martin, why not? Because he was sensational last year. He's one of the fastest guys in the class, if not the fastest guy in the class. And yeah, aside from a little issue towards the end of testing where he wasn't happy with some rear chatter, his preseason was pretty spectacular as well. So if he can handle pressure a little bit better, he did at the end of last year. I think he's someone that can really take the fight to Pecco the whole season long.
The thing about that rear chatter, apparently there were a few riders who had that rear chatter. Their admission were basically saying there's just so much grip at the track. As I was saying about the surface, it's got so much grip that having so much grip is the first place that chatter really starts. So I don't think the chatter is going to be a problem through the whole of the season. You'll probably get Martin complaining about grip at the start of the championship, and then that'll be it, or at Qatar rather, and that'll be it for most of the season.
I think another factor as well affecting Martin will be what he does or what he decides to do for next season and beyond. Whether he changes manufacturer, takes another works contract somewhere else, that's obviously something that could prove to be distracting to some degree. We mentioned Pecco Bagnaia's mistakes, and Jorge Martin also had a couple of them at very sort of timely moments in 2023. So that's something else. Guys, I'm going to feel basically the same allotment of boredom by saying Bagnaia too. It's like you say, there's no hard evidence to go against the Italian. Everything is in place. Maybe only significant change is Paolo Ciabatti. What kind of influence did he have on Bagnaia and all the backroom dealings at Ducati? Maybe his influence was minuscule. Maybe it was bigger than we realize. That also could be something where if the team run into difficulties, how is that going to be handled internally at Bologna? So, and also, if Marc Marquez does do particularly well, how does that factor come into play? So, but yeah, Bagnaia is my head tip, and with my heart, I'm going to go for Brad Binder. Something a bit different. I think Brad managed to get the podium results. The championship results for him have been going up. I mean, 6th and 4th the last 3 seasons. Could be in the tight side of the top 3, just a bit more consistency. Is he going to be a regular winner? I think that's going to be a harder step than taking consistent podiums, which is going to keep him there or thereabouts, and then you never really know what's going to happen. So I'm going to say the South African. Why have none of us tipped somebody like Marco Bezzecchi, or another one of the Ducati boys?
Well, Dave tipped Mark and I tipped Martin, so those are Ducati boys. Also, we
outside
were
the
paying
obvious.
Yeah, I mean, Bezzecchi wasn't exactly lighting it up through preseason. He was very subdued in Sepang. Managed to find his feet in Qatar. Definitely got the grips with the GP23. But yeah, I think Bezzecchi's a quality rider. But I just wonder whether he'll be able to match the heights of last year. Just because it was so good last year, fighting for the title up until when was it, India and Japan? Sorry, whenever he then had that break where he broke his collarbone. I think it's going to be difficult to kind of match that again, just because you've got Bastianini, Marquez now in Ducati as well. For him to be fighting for top 3, I think will be tough. Also, Binder, as you said, Ad.
Yeah, I mean, Binder is also a good shout, but about Bezzecchi, there's a difference between being fast on occasion and putting a season together, and I don't think Bezzecchi has shown that he can put a season together. That's much more difficult. But you made an excellent point, Ad, about the absence of Paolo Ciabatti. There have been all sorts of rumblings about things that have been going on with Ducati. You see them sort of like losing engineers to lots and lots of, they've gone to KTM, they've gone to Yamaha. There seem to be defections. There seems to be a general feeling of that there is something going on behind the scenes there. Bringing in a new sporting director, someone from marketing, how are they going to get on in that role? That I think it's going to be a really big change. And if there is any sort of internal dissent, if there's any just general sort of like dissatisfaction inside of Ducati, then I think that's going to have an oversized. It's going to be an oversized factory. It's going to be an oversized role.
No, I'm surprised there's no space in your big heart for Digia.
We're coming on to surprise of the season soon, mate.
Without further ado, that's the next category. Surprise of 2024.
Beautiful segue.
Oh, it was good. But actually, I'm going to trump you and go first. I'm going to go for, and this is one that was going to make both of you roll your eyes. I think this season's surprise is going to be Maverick Vinales. I think, there we go.
Okay.
This is
Yeah, no, I completely agree. He's going to be the real surprise is that he's, like he's going to be in World Superbikes in 2020 in 2025. So yeah, no, good shout.
This is why we put this category early on in the pod, just to get the cynicism right, off the scale. But hear me out.
I've always got spare.
Hear me out. I think this the Aprilia and the Viñales package is ripening. We know Maverick can be very inconsistent with his emotions and his form, even in the space of one day, never mind a Grand Prix or a season. But I just have a feeling that I think it's coming together, and almost he got those wild swings out of the way in the preseason where things were not looking good in Sepang. Suddenly back in Qatar, he'd found his feeling again and things were looking pretty promising. And I also think he's going to start his season of surprise by being on the podium at Losail. As I mentioned earlier, he's got 3 Grand Prix wins. I would put him down to excel there. I think he's going to do well, and I think he's going to be higher in the championship than most people expect. So therefore, he will be my surprise.
Adam, I want you to know that I will have clipped the last minute of this podcast and will have replayed it relentlessly on Twitter and social media through the year.
Is this going to be the Andrea Mino, the whatever year it was, Moto3 champion? I suspect it might well be. Look, Maverick Viñales. I think Maverick Viñales on the podium, Maverick Viñales possibly even to win at Qatar, absolutely outstanding shout. But the value of your investment can go up as well as down, and that is just Maverick Viñales all over the place. He will be up and down. He'll bounce around. He will once again fail to be consistent. He doesn't have the mental consistency to put a season together. I mean, he's going to do really well. He will have some really good races, and he's going to be completely faceless and out of there. So yeah, I mean the surprise for me. The surprise, Maverick Viñales will be a surprise if he manages to keep his seat for next year.
Yeah, need I remind you, to come on? Sorry. Need I remind you, gentlemen, that Maverick was only 12th at Sepang at the test, and I think 6th in the Qatar test, behind both Alessio Spargaro and Raul Fernandez, and still stating that he's not comfortable on this year's bike. I mean, I don't see really where this optimism is coming from, because, as we well know, Maverick is normally the absolute king of testing. So maybe he's going to reverse it and mediocre testing, brilliant racing.
No, I mean, he seemed to be much more happier and comfortable in Qatar. And that's what I said. I think he's got his wild swings out of the way early on. And that's why I'm saying he's going to be one of the big surprises. Or my big surprise of the season. So I'm happy to be, proven wrong, but it will be a long old stretch. I know what I'm putting myself up for. Neil, what's your surprise? Who's going to be your surprise?
So I'm going to mention 2 things. I know you're going to roll your eyes at me, but first Okay. So my first one is that Alex Marquez is going to have a really brilliant season, and I think is going to surprise everyone, maybe even fight for top 5 in the championship and win more than one race. That's my first one, because no one's really spoken about Alex Marquez so far this year, but he's had a very solid preseason. No longer the focus of attention in the Gresini box, and I think that'll work for him. And my second one is that Yamaha might not be as far away as we think they are. I think that Yamaha and Fabio Quartararo could well be a little bit closer to the kind of the sharp end and to the action in the first part of the year, maybe even capable of a couple of podium finishes in the first 7 or 8 races, just because I know it hasn't quite come together for them yet. But I think indications from testing were generally quite decent that the bike isn't there yet, but everything other than the bike is kind of coming into place for them to prosper. Obviously, the concessions this year will allow them to continue developing their bike, their engine, to test as a good deal throughout the season, which I think they're planning to utilize with Cal Crutchlow and the test team. And we know that Fabio is an absolutely class rider. Now, he said he was powerless to really hang with Enea Bastianini when he was doing his race run on the final day in Qatar at the test. But I do think that maybe by round 5 or 6, when we get to sort of Jerez, we could maybe see Fabio back fighting for the podium again.
Dave, I could see you chomping at the bit when Neil was extolling the virtues of Alex Marquez. Opinion?
Like I think that's a good point. Like, I think Alex is going to have a good season. Again, I think this is going to be the second year in a row, or for the first time in a long time, where he's basically been with the same team for a while. That, I think, is going to be very good for him. And exactly as Neil said, it's very good for him that he can go about his business without being the centre of attention. He can go about his business with, everyone is going to be looking at Mark. No one's going to be looking at him. He can just get on with it. So yeah, I think he's going to have a very solid season. I think there's every chance that he could win a race. Top 5, a little bit optimistic, but we'll see. And I mean, if I can jump straight in with my surprise, because I'm going to follow Neil here a little bit. My surprise, I think, is going to be Alex Rins. Alex, the feedback from Yamaha was just they were really impressed with Rins. And Rins himself has actually grown a lot. He's become a better rider. I think the bike is going to suit him. His feedback is going to be good. He's going to be a much better match for Fabio Quartararo than Franco Morbidelli was. He has a really positive attitude as well. He was always like that. At Suzuki, he was the same. He'd have a really good weekend and then have a really bad weekend, but he'd always be he would always be positive. He'd always find a way to sort of like push himself forward. So I think he's going to be good. And I think, again, I agree with Neil. The Yamaha is much, much closer. I get quite tired of people on Twitter saying, "Oh, Yamaha need to build a V4." No, they don't. They won an absolute. I mean, they've got cupboards and cupboards full of trophies in which they beat V4s with an inline 4. The engine has got a lot more power. It still has an agility. The problems are eminently fixable. Their biggest problem, I think, is going to be qualifying. That, I think, is going to be a real problem. They have to be able to fix that. But I know that both Rins and Quartararo will be spending a lot more time actually testing as well. Yamaha have a plan to actually go out and use their tests with their contracted riders to improve the bike. So yeah, I think they're going to make a step forward, and I'm really quite interested. I'm actually quite optimistic about both Japanese factories. But I mean, for me, I think Alex Rins is going to be he's going to be he's going to surprise a few people this season.
Yeah, I think at the start of last year, Yamaha riders were complaining of a very twitchy, nervous bike, and they eventually dialed that in by the time we got to the flyaways and the end of the year. It is sort of, Fabio had refined that sort of confidence with the front end and was pushing for podiums fairly regularly again. And just as a very little quick addition, head over to Moto Matters for further reading on the matter, because there was an excellent interview with Yamaha boss Takahiro Sumi, which Dave did, I think, back in Sepang. So yeah, you want to check that out.
Not me. That was Akira Nishimura, our Japanese friend and colleague, who I mean, the advantage is he does these things in Japanese, and so he gets a little bit more out of it than me, whose Japanese is non-existent, do.
It was excellent, so I assumed it was yours.
I don't know what fixation you have with riders called Alex, but Alex Marquez, as good as he is, he's getting nowhere near the top 5. And Dave, I think Alex Rins is still hobbling from his leg injury. I mean, he still has significant metal work inside, and I think that could be something that is, if it doesn't play on his mind, then when he comes off the bike, then it's something that's also going to be a factor. I know all of these guys have, some form of titanium inside their bodies, and they're all carrying some sort of issue, but I think it's a steep curve for Rinzi.
Yeah, I mean, yes, he's definitely still hurt, and it was a really bad injury, and I think he's going to be carrying that for a while. But I mean, this category's bigger surprise, and surprise is all about expectations, and I think expectations for Rins are quite low, and I think that's why I think he's going to surprise people by coming in with a few really strong results. He's not going to be champion, but he's going to do a lot better, and he's going to push Fabio Quartararo a lot harder than people expect.
Our next category is the biggest rider switch for 2025. I think you have to credit Marc Marquez here and the decision that he eventually makes. Does he stay in a satellite team with his brother where things, he could bring in his own sponsors? There's a certain amount of freedom there. I don't think we're going to be getting quite as much media. Or maybe we will get more media time. I don't know with Mark. I mean, who knows
Less.
What kind of less you think? Okay. Well, who knows?
Yeah, no. As I understand it, he has far fewer media engagements. I think what it'll be is there will be fewer media engagements, but it'll be a little bit more in depth. So it could actually be a really interesting year to try to talk to Mark.
Well, if things go well, then perhaps it could be a format he's interested in. Otherwise, he has to jump back into the factory status wheel of promotion and whatever else. And we know with HRC, he was always busy at various times in Indonesia and in Southeast Asia doing different kind of events and whatever else. Perhaps this is something that he doesn't feels that he doesn't need to do anymore. So I think there is. But then again, Dave, if you listen to some of our comments in podcasts about the preseason test, then you can see. Arguably the difference between riding for a satellite team and riding for a factory team with some of the technical gremlins or maybe some of the technical resources that you have to hand. But I think whatever decision Mark makes, and that's going to be a question by mid-season that's going to get pretty hot in various news outlets. I will say wherever Jorge Martin goes. It could be HRC, it could be into Fabio Quartararo's saddle if he leaps out of Yamaha. But I think Martin, as I was mentioning earlier, the decision he makes for the future is going to be the biggest rider switch.
I would completely agree with that, and I think he's going to go to Aprilia. I think that at the moment the Aprilia looks like the best package. I mean, it's going to be between money and competitiveness, and the Aprilia is going to be the most competitive package. But Honda and Yamaha will probably throw a very sizable pile of cash at him to get on the bike, especially if Quartararo leaves. It's going to be interesting to see whether it's who gets their first their offer first, who leaves first, whether it's Martin or whether it's Quartararo. Normally, there's going to be like there's a hierarchy, right? It'll be Mark first. Once Mark is signed, then it'll be that. Like Pecco, we knew that Pecco was going to sign. We knew he was going to sign with Ducati. He was always going to be the first domino to fall. Who's going to be the second? This time, Martin and Quartararo, those two are the absolute key to the championship, to the silly season. And it's going to be very interesting to see which one of those two goes first. But I agree with you. I think it's going to be Jorge Martin, and I think he's going to go to Aprilia.
I will say that the biggest rider switch for 25 will be the same biggest rider switch for 24. I think it will be Marc Marquez. I can't see him staying in Gresini for a further season, and therefore he is likely to switch to a factory team, maybe to the factory Ducati team if he starts the season brilliantly. I mean, that could be quite sensational. And then another thing that a lot of people have floated is potentially him going back to Honda, but I guess that is very much dependent on just how strong Honda show themselves to be this season. So, Mark is definitely one to keep an eye on. And I mean, it's juicy enough for him being on a Ducati in a satellite team, but the thought of him maybe even going to the factory Ducati team is just, my eyes roll in the back of my head just thinking about that.
Yeah, but Neil, can they afford him? And why would they want him, especially if they had to pay extra to secure Bagnaia for 2 more years?
Because he would maybe be cheap. Compared to the salaries that he was basically demanding at Honda in his pomp, obviously it wouldn't be anywhere near that. And if you're looking at results on a competitive, solely through a competitive lens, then if he starts the season brilliantly, then that he's proved himself to be a guaranteed championship contender, and you want as many of those in your armory as possible.
Yeah, the reason you put Mark in the factory team is to make sure that a factory bike wins the championship. If it looks like it's going to be if he looks capable of winning the championship on a Ducati, you want him winning in the factory team. I can see Mark actually staying where he is. I think the freedom that riders get in a satellite team. I mean, we've seen it before. We've talked about it before. Cal Crutchlow was a fantastic satellite rider because he was so much more free to act and to be himself. He had far fewer commitments. He wasn't as tied down. I think Mark is going to really enjoy being able to just concentrate on riding, on racing, not have to worry about testing, all the rest of it. You're absolutely right. Things go wrong a lot more often in satellite teams than they do in factory teams. But I think it's going to be really interesting. For example, let's see what happens at the Jerez test. Normally, the Jerez test, he was always, Mark was very, very busy, like all factory riders, because they've got so much to do. He's going to go out, play around with some settings in the morning, and then bugger off home in the afternoon. A nice early tea, as they say. I think it's going to be. He's going to feel liberated, feel released, feel a lot more free, and it's going to be an interesting season from that perspective.
Can we also just make a quick nod to Pedro Acosta, because his next contract is not going to be a short one. You imagine any kind of factory team or manufacturer is going to try and tie him up for at least 3 years, and where he decides to go is going to be perhaps shape MotoGP for the coming years.
There's another factor here which we have to remember, which is that we're talking about contracts for 25 and 26. The technical rules change for 27. And I think it is very risky to sign a contract for the 2027 season right now. Because, first of all, we don't know what the technical regulations are going to be. I mean, it's probably going to be 85 or 150cc. It's probably going to be 75 millimeter bore. Their ride height devices will be gone. Aerodynamics is going to be, there's still a long, hard fight. And again, our friend and colleague, Peter McLaren on Crash.net, had an excellent interview with Corrado Ceccanelli, Director of Technology, about this. He was basically saying, look, we're still talking about the aerodynamics. That's going to be a factor. That's going to be an important thing for how what happens and how the bikes end up behaving. But it's a risk to go and sign a contract right now for 2027. The bikes haven't even been built yet. They haven't been designed yet. Every time the technical regulations change, especially when there's a bigger change, then you get surprises. People come back. For example, with the Honda, the 2012 Honda, 2011 Honda was already quite good. The 2012 Honda, the 1000cc, was just a superb machine. Absolutely fantastic machine. Some factories get it right. Other factories get it a little bit wrong. So it's a risk.
Neil, over to you. Which Japanese team or brand wins first this season?
I think it's going to be Joan Mir and the Suzuki. Oh, no, wait, that's going back 2 years. Well, I kind of feel like I've covered this a little bit with my surprise of the season. I mentioned that I think Yamaha certainly isn't quite as far away as some people are saying. And Yamaha's best rider is Fabio Quartararo, although I take Dave's point on board that Alex Rins is going to have a good season and will surprise a few folk. But yeah, if you held the gun to my head, it would have to be Fabio and the Yamaha. However, that being said, I can't see that happening in the first half of the year. I mean, I think we're looking at probably the end of the year and probably in quite strange circumstances. I do expect them to be quite strong in races, but to actually be winning, I'm not saying with total confidence that he or Yamaha will win a race this year.
I'm gonna say Alex Rins in Qatar, because why not? Dave, your thoughts?
Mark is going to win at Qatar. I mean, yeah, it's going to be Yamaha, I think. I mean, like, I really get the idea, the sense that Honda made a really massive step forward compared to last year, but they were a lot further behind, and so they've got more catching up to do. They do have the resources. Luca Marini is just incredible. everyone keeps on sort of, talking about how fantastic his feedback is, his technical feedback, his ability to understand and to prioritize this. This is what we need to fix now. So I think they're going to catch up quite quickly. But I think the Yamaha is much closer to being ready to win. And I'm going to stick my neck out and say, I think we might just see Fabio Quartararo win at Mugello.
Wow.
I think that would it would suit the bike. The bike is fast. It's quite, it's always been good. Maybe even Alex Rins. I think Alex Rins could be fast around Mugello as well. So, yeah, I think they could surprise a few people there.
Need I remind you which factory calls Mugello its backyard?
Well, this is yes, indeed. But I actually think that I think also Mugello is a track where qualifying doesn't matter quite as much because there are lots of different ways of being fast around there. It's not where, like, Jerez is a place where you start. If you start on P9, that's it. Race is over. Mugello, you can actually make progress. You can get through the field. There's a lot of overtaking opportunities. A little bit like Assen as well. Assen is another track where there's a lot of overtaking opportunities, far more than other places. So, yeah, and the Yamaha is fast. They have found a lot more horsepower. So, yeah, I can feel it in my water, but then it's possible that somebody's been poisoning my water.
Dave, need I remind you also that Fabio Quartararo nor Mugello are part of the 2024 Esports Championship, so I don't think the chances of that victory happening are going to happen there either. Keep talking, Dave, because the next category you kind of semi-answered already. How many races before Marc Marquez wins with the Ducati?
What race is Cota again? Number 3?
Yes.
But I mean, can you even count that? Because it is the Circuit of the Americas. I mean, there's two answers. First of all, there is Cota, but you have to discount Cota because Marc is just very special around Cota, and it's a weird track and it's very odd. You might, thinking about it, the Ducati can be a bit difficult around there because it's so bumpy. And again, the bumps are going to get worse. So let's see about that. The next question, the next one is when is Marc properly comfortable? I think after Jerez, I think he could be very fast at Jerez, but I think basically after the Jerez test, he will have the bike dialed in. He'll have himself dialed into the bike. From there, it's from there it could be any race really. I think it's going to take him 4, 5, 6 races to get his head around the nuances, the details of the bike. So yeah, that's what I think.
I'm going to say round 10 because that's Sachsenring. But then I'll also be a little bit more romantic and go for round 6 at Catalonia, a home Grand Prix.
Yeah, that's a good shout. But he's never been really all that strong at, it's never been really one of his better tracks, Barcelona, as far as I can remember. I know he's won a lot and he's been very successful at Jerez, but Barcelona was just never one of those tracks that really worked for him. Now, Aragon, that's a completely different kettle of fish. So, but yeah, Sachsenring is a good shout as well.
Neil, is there any possible candidates left?
Yeah, I think you boys have hoovered them all up. I'll go along with Dave. Yeah, round 3, I can see Marc winning there fairly comfortably. Yeah.
He doesn't do it in Qatar?
I don't think so. I mean, I think he'll be strong. I think he'll be fighting for the podium, but the factory Ducati guys they were considerably faster than him, and I know he will be faster after another weekend under his belt. But yeah, I think Qatar just comes a bit too soon.
Dave, who stops Ducati for another Triple Crown?
This is a good question. It's going to be Aprilia or KTM. I'm going to go with Aprilia because I think Aleix Espargaro is going to have a really strong season. He's been really comfortable all through pre-season testing. He's looked very good. And I think that, Miguel Oliveira's had a bit of a miserable pre-season, but I think once he gets his head around the new bike, then he will be much more competitive. I think Raul Fernandez will have the occasional good result as well. Maverick Vinales will be up and down, as we said. And so I think that overall, there's always going to be, I think Alesia's going to be really good, and there's always going to be a second fast Ducati or Aprilia in there. So I can see that Aprilia could be the factory, the team maybe, to upset the apple cart and get in and sort of and ruin that that Triple Crown. Then again, you could say that maybe Gresini take the team championship if both Mark and Alex have a good team. But does that count as Ducati as upsetting Ducati's apple cart, because they're not? That wouldn't be a factory team. There wouldn't be a factory bike. I think there's a non-zero chance of Gresini winning the team championship this year.
Neil, do you believe it will be Austria or Italy, or do you think there's more chance of another manufacturer beating Ducati in Moto2?
Yes, I think it's Austria is more likely. You said that you could maybe see Brad winning the championship this year, Ad. I was just looking at the championship table from last year, and really from India. Okay, Binder wasn't always fighting for victories, but he was a very consistent player at the front of MotoGP races, and there were several occasions when he was actually fighting for victories in that time. It seemed like the carbon chassis was the final step. Well, not the final step, but certainly brought him a lot closer to the very top of MotoGP in that kind of autumn period of last year after Dani Pedrosa tried it at Misano. And we know that he's not a legendary tester, and he's not the kind of Maverick Vinales always hunting for the fastest times, but just the noises coming out of Binder have been so quietly confident that I don't think he carries himself in that way if he doesn't believe that they're up for doing something pretty interesting this year. I thought last year taught him some pretty tough lessons. There were occasions where he probably should have won races and didn't quite come away with the result that maybe he had the potential for. I'm thinking of Phillip Island, I'm thinking of Thailand, Valencia, obviously, where he had that massive moment out of the lead. Those were all three places where he arguably could have won. Didn't quite do it, but I feel that if he starts the season on the right foot, then I think he could go on a bit of a run and be a continual thorn in the side of Ducati. He was a continual thorn in the side of Ducati last year, the probably the most persistent thorn in their side. So yeah, I think KTM have worked well this off season, and Binder's my man to take the fight to Bologna.
If I could have a bit of a moan, Brad Binder is a really nice young man. He's incredibly fast, incredibly talented, and I think it's a very decent shout saying that he could really sort of upset the apple cart a little bit. But he's also really good at not saying anything. His debriefs are always incredibly irritating to type up, because you sort of like go through and you go, oh, right, oh, no, he hasn't actually given us any information whatsoever, which is just, I think he has no interest in speaking to us at all. But apart from that, he's a charming young man and very likable. But yeah, he's not telling us anything. So you don't really know what's going on.
He's not telling us anything, but he did say in those debriefs that Sepang was the best preseason test he had ever had. And that if they could, I think one of the quotes was, if we could sort of fix one or two small things, then we're going to be there. And you don't say that sort of thing unless you really believe it. So I can see Binder being up there.
It's a very close run thing between KTM and Aprilia, because they both have two riders that can bring home the points, and then there's two other riders where you have really no idea what they're capable of. Dave, your point about Miguel Oliveira getting familiar with the 24 RSGP is really good. I still think Raul Fernandez is going to produce a few surprises, more perhaps because expectations are fairly low this year. But then on the other side, for Gas
10th place counts as a surprise.
Poor Raul, another person we won't be hearing on the Paddock Pass podcast anytime soon. But I think I'll just say Austria, because Gas is a separate brand, but Pedro Acosta has some real potential there. I think we're going to be writing quite a bit about him this year. And at the moment, the way things roll, I just think the KTM is a little further ahead. Anyway, on to our last big category before we get to a couple of fun, shorter questionnaires, I guess you could say, and that's our Moto2 and Moto3 champions. Dave, stay with us, don't go to sleep just yet.
I was hoping I could go first, actually.
We're gonna leave Neil to last here because he's clearly much more informed.
He actually knows what he's talking about. So, Neil knows what he's talking about.
Just
for fear of stealing your thunder, Neil, I'm going to go first. Moto3, I'm going to put my money on David Alonso. And with a special mention to Colin Bayer, who had a fantastic rookie year last year. And I think the extra maturity and experience means he's going to be a regular podium guy. So he could be firmly in the mix. And for Moto2, I think you'd be stupid if you looked too far beyond Fermin Aldeguer. If he gets his contract sorted early, what he's going to be doing for 2025, then that's also something that's important. I would also just make a special shout out for Senna Agius as well, the young Australian. He comes in as the European Moto2 champion, and in his wildcard outings last year, he wasn't too far away. He didn't look too shabby. I think he's quite an exciting talent and maybe one to watch out for. Dave?
Moto2 spot on. I think it's going to be Fermin Aldeguer. He starts as champion, as favourite, and I think he's going to be the rider to beat. Also, Joe Roberts has looked very sort of comfortable. It's going to be interesting to see how he can get on this year. I think Joe's problem has always been that he's been a bit up and down throughout the season, but let's see how he goes. Again, this is how many seasons has he been in Moto2 now? I think 5 or 6. So he's understanding the class. The Pirellis make a huge difference. They're a real wild card. In Moto3, I think I really like Colin Fayer. I think he really has something special. He has all of the tools. He has not just the outright talent, but especially like the maturity, the calmness. He handles the pressure very, very well. He's got the right people around him. I just think he's a very impressive young man, and I think he's going to do very well.
Neil, bearing in mind how his career went after the last time you tipped Andrea Migno to be world champion, are you absolutely sure that you want to go ahead with this prediction?
For the 50th time on this podcast, I didn't tip him to be champion. All right, I tipped him to have a good season, right? And my words were twisted for all of eternity. Still continue to be so. However, I'll forget that ad. I think your shots are both very good in both Moto2 and Moto3. I think Jose Antonio Rueda is maybe worth a punt in Moto3. And I'm saying that, I know it's just one preseason test, but he was so fast. Not just over one lap, but his race simulation that he did at Jerez was insane. For some context, anyone that did a race or a kind of a longer run that was more than 6 laps, he was 4/10 at least per lap faster than anyone else, which is absolutely wild for Moto3. Pirelli's super fast, contributing to that. Also, the new KTM is a real step up, and I think they've kind of changed the concept of the bike. It used to be KTM's just braked hard, deep, late into corners and then gassed it out. I think now you have to be a little gentler with the brake and carry more speed into the corner. They've almost gone in the kind of Honda direction with their new bike. And Rueda came through Junior GP riding Hondas, so I think this bike is maybe just a bit more in line with his style. And he's a quality rider, the first ever rider to win Rebel Rookies and Junior GP in the same year, in 2022. So I think, and he's riding with Akiayo's team, quality setup. So I'm going to go with Rueda in Moto3, and it's hard to look past Fermin, isn't it? He didn't have the best test at Jerez. If you looked at Jerez, Aaron Canet and Joe Roberts would be your picks, because those guys, in terms of rhythm, were light years ahead of the rest. But I just think that Fermin was so good towards the end of last year that when it clicks with him, he can go on a run and win, 5-6 races in a row, maybe even more. So I think Aldeguer is a good shot.
Is the because the thing about the Jerez test is a rider like Rueda will have done 12 trillion laps around there, racing there in Red Bull Rookies, Junior Cup, all of that sort of thing. He will have ridden there during in junior races as well. Is it a little bit of a risk to read too much into a track where a youngster knows really, really well?
Massively, but that's what we're here for, Dave.
Fair, yeah. Fair.
Yeah, a higher up at KTM told me that it's going to be between 5 guys, and it's Holgado, Rueda, Alonso, Vire, and Ortola. So take your pick from that 5, I would say.
5 more quickfire categories, guys. I'm going to throw these questions at you, and you have to answer me sort of in one line with a very brief justification. That's brief justification, Dave. Okay. You're up first. Who will be the crashiest rider in 2024?
That's a really good question. I haven't even thought about it. I am going to say... Hang on, let me...
We've thrown him.
I'm going to say Joan Mir. I think Joan Mir is going to try too hard, and he's going to fall off a lot.
I disagree. I think the Honda is going to be a lot kinder to him this year. I'm just going to say Marc again. I think he's going to take some time to explore the limits on the Ducati. And while it's going to be nothing like the disaster of last year, I think Marc Marquez again. It sounds a bit ridiculous. Neil?
I'm going to go with Aaron Canet in Moto2, because he was the most crashing rider behind Marquez last year with 24 crashes. Ably backed up those numbers with 20 crashes in 2022 and 21 in 2021. So it was no outlier, and that was kind of a habit. So I think Canet, we can count on him for doing that again. And I would assume there'll probably be 2 or 3 of those from leading positions in races.
Next category, the GP you're most looking forward to. I'm going to say Circuit of the Americas, or the Red Bull Grand Prix of the Americas, if it's still Red Bull. Also Barcelona, because as I've said before, I get to sleep in my own bed. And Le Mans for atmosphere. Dave?
Assen, because I love Assen.
Thank you for using the correct name. Neil?
That's right. Always good to go to the cathedral.
Phillip Island, I guess. I mean, it's always a highlight of anyone's year, if you ever bother going, Dave. And
it's too far away.
Yeah, and I think there's a week off before it. There's a week off, or there's a week between Motegi and Phillip Island. Therefore, chance to maybe go and see part of Australia that I haven't seen before. So, yeah.
I will not be going back after the fiasco of last year. That will be, I'm going to give it another couple of years, I think. Which rider is going to be out of MotoGP at the end of the 2024 season? Neil?
It's a tough one. Which rider do I really want to upset? I mean, it's hard to look past Augusto Fernandez, unfortunately, at this current time. I do hope he turns it around and proves me wrong. But it's been a pretty horrible preseason, and he just hasn't really been able to get comfortable. And his rookie teammate's been showing him up. So it's hard to see Augusto having a super bright future in the class. Yeah,
I'm going to say Aleix Espargaro, because I think he might just retire. That's probably the kindest option rather than picking anyone for being pretty bad. I think I know what your answer is going to be, Dave, but tell us anyway.
3 riders: Raul Fernandez, Maverick Vinales, and Taka Nakagami. Now, Raul Fernandez, because he just hasn't shown... Incredibly talented rider, just shown nothing in MotoGP. Maverick Vinales has had a billion chances because of his exceptional talent that has never been able to actually deliver on it. And Taka Nakagami, because I think Ayogura is going to be ready to move up, and Idemitsu want an Asian rider, either Japanese or someone else from the Southeast Asia on that bike. So those are my 3.
Maybe it's a big season also for Somket Chandra. If he could actually put some decent results together, then he could put himself in position for that ride. But
it's going to be interesting seeing Chandra versus Ogura, I think.
Keep talking, Dave, because one Grand Prix that should be scrapped.
Well, I would say Le Mans, just because I absolutely despise the place. Qatar, because it's horrible.
Neil?
Yeah, Qatar or Aragon. Sorry, Dave, but is it really necessary to have 4 races in Spain?
No, it's no. All right. In that case, well, what about Valencia? Can we
Yeah.
not do Valencia?
Let's do. Yeah, I'll go for Valencia.
Well, Jerez should be the last race of the season. I mean, this is the trouble. I mean, it would be fantastic having Jerez as the last race of the season instead of the first European second European race. But never mind.
Yeah, I agree. I'll say Kazakhstan just because, it just seems such a left field. I'm all up for going for new territories, but it just seems like, what state is the circuit in? There's very little information. It's a nightmare to get to. It's going to be 1 hour commute from Almaty, which seems like quite a delightful capital city, but the track, complete mystery. And just one of those events that doesn't seem quite to make sense unless, of course, ticket sales are through the roof. But again, we don't know. And then,
I mean, it makes sense because whoever who owns the circuit has an absolute fortune in oil money, which they're going to pay Dorna, and that's the reason we're going there. Just it's the same reason we go to Qatar. There's lots and lots of petrochemical money floating around, and someone has motorsports as a hobby.
The last category: what is going to be the most welcome sight in 2024 MotoGP? Dave?
The end of the Valencia test, because
we haven't even started yet.
Yeah, well, God, yeah, but I mean, 21 races, mate. It's too many. It's just I know I'm going to get sort of a criticism for this because fans, all they have to do is switch the TV on Sunday. They don't have to travel on the Wednesday, stay up until some ridiculous time in the morning trying to think of something to write about racing. The calendar is too long. There are too many races. So yeah, that.
Neil, do you have anything slightly more upbeat?
Yeah, hopefully. I mean, I say this with hope in my voice. The most welcome sight will be of shots other than a crowd member holding up a sign which says, "Can I have your glove? Insert rider's name." I would like to see an end of that. That's one of my pet peeves. It was funny the first time we saw it. The shot cut to a rider holding up his glove, smiling. But every single weekend, it's like, let's get creative with these signs. I'm all for bringing signs and supporting riders, but less of the "Can I have your glove" chat. It's dull and it's unoriginal.
Can I have your motorhome?
Yeah.
Jack, can I have your boat?
Where does it stop?
Exactly. That's right. Can I have your baby?
Well, on a serious note, I'm going to say whatever happens at Assen this year, because I believe that's where MotoGP is going to be celebrating quite a bit of its heritage, its 75-year history. We could see some special liveries at some point. There could be some other stuff going on that really makes it a big deal. People who listen to this podcast on a regular basis, and I'm a big history buff, so I think MotoGP needs to celebrate its heroes and its achievements and whatever else far more than it actually does. So I'm looking forward to seeing what kind of activations happen during the summer.
And what better place to celebrate history than at the Cathedral of Speed?
Yeah, I mean, if I can get like a spray can on my way out, when nobody's looking, I'm going to deface that sign.
I'm really excited about Assen, but not for the reasons you stated, Adam. I'm going to stand outside the access gate on Friday morning and watch Dave Emmett try and enter on his motorcycle.
Actually, it's usually the Thursday which is the trouble. Which is that's always the first problem that I have. So that's the first time I have to stop myself from running someone over. But
please film on a GoPro this year.
Yeah, I've learned to arrive early to get the arguments over right from the start.
I think we should set up a live stream for our Patreons.
Yeah.
From your GoPro, Dave.
They can hear me arguing in Dutch.
Exactly.
Well, listen, speaking of which, we're almost done, but two important things. Firstly, this is the last week to join us on our Paddock Pass Podcast Patreon channel for the year at a 10% discount if you sign up now, and as a Paddock Insider. It's the cost of a couple of Starbucks coffees a month. I know you don't know what that means, Dave, but it's not much money at all. And for that, you'll get special content, exclusive news and event reactions, as well as our Paddock note shows from each day of a MotoGP Grand Prix. Why join for the year? Well, this weekend, weekend, we'll be drawing a name from a select group for some free paddock passes for a Grand Prix of your choice this season. Secondly, more chances to win. Our fantasy league is now up and running. Search for Alpine Stars Paddock Pass podcast in the league options on MotoGP.com and join us. Thanks to A-Stars, we'll be able to give away a cool box of prizes at the end of the season. And after a couple of requests, we'll be setting up our teams in our names because we're desperate for even more humiliation and ritual embarrassment. So you'll be able to find us easily and send us lots of very positive and happy messages that you know far more about MotoGP than we do. Don't forget, we'll be running the Paddock Pass podcast a little differently this year. We'll have our show on audio channels on Sunday after the races, followed by a shorter weekly discussion podcast during the week. If you have any comments or suggestions or things you'd like to hear or see, then let us know in the comments section on SoundCloud, YouTube, Patreon, or any of us through Twitter. We'll be back with the first Paddock Note show from LaSalle on Thursday evening. Thanks for listening. Dave, Neil, thanks for all the utterly worthless predictions and comments on this podcast today. And good luck to us all.